Hey everyone, Dan here, and we are about 2 weeks away from the premiere of the Bloodshot movie, the new Vin Diesel movie, and the first entry in the cinematic Valiant universe, basically, of characters. Now, I know that not everybody is familiar with these characters as say they are with the Marvel or DC universe. I mean, I personally love these characters, as you can tell by my little Bloodshot bear, and my Vin Diesel looking action figure. But I figure not everybody knows who these characters are or who Bloodshot is, so I thought I'd do this little primer video here and get people up to speed and ready for the movie. So, let's see who Bloodshot is. Now, the creation of Bloodshot started at first with the creation of Valiant Comics. Now, this was the 90s. It was around the same time that Image Comics was starting up. Marvel was having some issues monetarily, and there was a bidding war for them. Some people were trying to buy them. Now, Ron Perlman ended up winning the bid. The next highest bidder was a group that was a bunch of investors, along with former Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, along with Steven Masarski, and they got outbid. So they took their idea of wanting to do a comic company, and they made their own. They started Voyager Communications, and an imprint of that was Valiant Comics. Now, they wanted to mix, they wanted the Marvel feel first, so they went out and got a bunch of old a bunch of Marvel writers and artists, I want to say old, and they picked up a licensing deal with Western Publishing to be able to use characters like Turok the Dinosaur Hunter and Magnus Robot Fighter and Solar the Man of the Atom. And they mixed that with some original creations such as Exo-Man of War and Ninjak and the Eternal Warrior and Shadow Man and stuff like that. Now, Eternal Warrior number 4 was the first time we got to see Bloodshot. He was in the last 3 panels of the issue as just a cameo. And then the following week, he appeared in Ray number 0. And this was all in November of 1992. So that was the first appearance of the comic, of the character. He's credited to being created to Kevin Van Hook, Don Perlin, and Bob Layton. And he had his first comic appearance of his own book was in February of 1993, and it's probably the best-selling Valiant comic of all time. It's estimated to have sold 1 million copies in February of 93. Now, that's a ton of books. Now, in the early 90s, there was more books doing those kind of numbers, but this is probably the best Valiant book number-wise. Now, the series ran from 93 to 96 straight and didn't stop there, but the company changed. It was bought out and changed to Acclaim Comics, and the series continued on until 2002 when everything shut down and we didn't have Bloodshot on the comic shelves for about a decade. And then there was the relaunch of Valiant in 2010, 2011, 2012, that era, and a new Bloodshot number 1 came out in 2012, and it was well received, including getting the Best Comic Award from Diamond Comic Distributors. So we got Bloodshot back in 2012, and he's been going strong ever since. Now, the next big question is, who is Bloodshot? And that's where things get pretty complicated. I mean, you could do a short answer of, what if Frank Castle had gone through the Super Soldiers program instead of Steve Rogers? But that's Marvel. This is not. So what it is that he comes from a group called Project Rising Spirit, which was a government super soldier program that had been in the works for a very long time before this character ever got involved. And the whole idea was that they would use nanites to enhance their soldiers, but also to manipulate their memory so they could control them. And that's where it gets kind of bad. Now, this particular character, we don't know who he is, what his real name is. We know him as Ray Garrison because that's the first memory they gave him that stuck. That's the one that he had when everything broke down. And Ray Garrison, in his mind, is a Marine who has a wife and a child who were killed, and he wants to get revenge for that killing. Now, project was working fine. The whole thing was working fine. They were using him as an assassin and all these other things. And then they heard about psiots. And psiots are basically humans with psionic powers. And the higher-ups in Project Rising Spirit decided to use Bloodshot to go out and find these psiots and bring them in. Now, there was a doctor named Kurtik who didn't agree with this, left Project Rising Spirit, and he ended up hooking up with Toyo Harada's Harbinger Foundation, and together they set up a plan to capture Bloodshot while he was on just a routine mission in Afghanistan, and they went into his head and his memories and stuff and tried to pull out all the information about Project Rising Spirit from the nanites and whatnot, but in doing so, they unlocked all the other false memories and just awoke this character and basically set him on the path to going rogue, where he hooks up with an ambulance driver named Cara Murphy, and the two of them end up working together to save these psiots. So by working with the Harbinger Foundation, they released Bloodshot into the world, and this ended up putting him against both the Harbinger Foundation and Project Rising Spirit. So we end up with this Man on the Run series that has been going on for the last 28 years, and that's pretty much Bloodshot. The next question would be, what can Bloodshot do? Well, that's kind of a lot. He's already a weapons expert and a skilled hand-to-hand fighter, which could be from his previous life, or it could be something he was trained to as part of the project. But the cool stuff is what the nanites give him the ability to do. He has super regenerative healing factor, which allows him to recover from just about any wound as long as the nanites are functioning. He has superhuman strength, speed, endurance, reflexes, agility, and senses. He can camouflage himself. He has a malleable anatomy, which allows him to change shape and take on other people's appearances. He can give off a sonic scream and a neuropsychic pulse emission. He can, and if that wasn't well enough, he is a technopath, which means he can basically control electronics with his nanites, kind of like telepathy. Now, an interesting side note is that the nanites have to be fueled by protein. So Ray has to eat a lot of meat. And it doesn't have to be cooked or even something we'd normally eat. He is at times fed the nanites on the corpses of his enemies, because that's fun. Bloodshot hasn't appeared too much outside of the comics. There was a Bloodshot video game in the works in the late 90s for the PlayStation, but that got canceled. And he did appear in the Shadow Man game for the Nintendo 64 as a secret unlockable character. Now, there was a web series filmed in 2016. It was released in 2018 called Ninjak vs. the Valiant Universe. And it had Michael Rowe, who played Deadshot on Arrow, as Ninjak, and featured Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger from the Power Rangers, as Bloodshot. Now, I had a chance to actually go down and watch a filming of that. And was there the day that they shot. So for me, that, it's got a good, strong place in my heart. But it was a web series where now we're getting a major motion picture. Now, there are 2 toys of the characters, well, 3 technically, besides the Bloodshot Bear from Build-A-Bear that I showed you at the beginning of the video. There is the new McFarlane toy with the Vin Diesel likeness, but there is also a little mini-mate that came out a few years ago that was released in one of 2 Valiant 2-packs that also had Ninjak, Shadow Man, and Exo Man of War. Now, I don't remember who exactly was with Bloodshot. I think it was Ninjak. It might have been Exo. It's been a while. But they're neat, and I have them somewhere packed away. Now let's talk about the movie itself. It stars Vin Diesel as Ray Garrison, also known as Bloodshot. There's Eiza Gonzalez Reyna, who plays KT. There's Sam Heughan from the Outlander series, who plays Jimmy Dalton. Toby Cabell, who you may remember from the horrible Fantastic Four movie, is Martin Axe, and Guy Pearce is Dr. Emil Harting, while Lamorne Morris is Wilfred Wiggins. Now, it's directed by David S.F. Wilson from a script by Jeff Wadlow and Eric Heiserer. I'm killing those names, and I apologize if you are one of those people and you hear me slaughter your names. Now, as you can probably tell by the character names, not the people names, that this is not exactly the same as the comic I described earlier. Now, there's probably not going to be any mentions of Psyops. Now, originally there was going to be a Harbinger film that was either going to take place before or after Bloodshot, depending, so there was going to be a tie. But a lot of things have changed, and I believe those links have been severed, and the plan is to have the Harbinger movie distributed by Paramount, where this one's coming out from Sony. So don't expect this to be the launch of a brand new shared universe. Or at least, if it is, it's being done very quietly. Now, the Sony premise reads like this. After he and his wife are suddenly assassinated, Marine Ray Garrison is reborn by a team of scientists. Enhanced with nanotechnology, he becomes a superhuman biotech killing machine, Bloodshot. As Ray first trains with fellow super soldiers, he struggles to recall anything from his previous years. But when his memories flood back and he remembers the man that killed both him and his wife, he breaks out of the facility hell-bent on revenge, only to discover that there's more to the conspiracy than he originally felt. Now again, this feels completely different from the comics in the outside forces that are driving him. There's no psyops. In the comics, there are no other soldiers that he's working with. But the heart of the character still seems to be there, and that's what I think is important. You can't take an exact adaptation from one medium to the other. There's always going to be changes, and I think that this is probably going to be a faithful change, or a faithful adaptation in the character, maybe not as so much the story itself. Now, the initial trailer when it came out, it featured a song called Memories Are Made of This by Johnny Cash, and it plays over and over again. And a lot of people talked about it having a Memento feeling, the Christopher Nolan film, which is interesting enough also stars Guy Pearce, who's in this. Now, while people were mentioning the Memento feel, it was talked about in a very positive way, and the trailer was very well received, so I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty successful movie. The trailers look good. I think there's enough of a buzz for it. And the film is due out on March 13th. It's from Sony Pictures. Now, currently there's no ratings on Rotten Tomatoes that gives, what people's anticipation is or anything like that. So we can't really judge by that. But again, my gut tells me this is probably going to be a successful film. Now, if you want to do some reading before the film comes out, I can suggest a few of the graphic novels to you. I don't think you can go wrong with just about any of them, but let's start with Valiant Masters Bloodshot, Volume 1, Blood of the Machine. Now, this is Kevin Van Hook and Don Perlin. This is the original run from 1993 to 96, and this is the heart of the character. This is where it all began. Kevin's writing is fantastic. Don is just old school Marvel, and the book looks great. So this is something definitely worth picking up. If you want something a little more recent, you want a little more of what's going on from Valiant now, I'd say the Bloodshot Definitive Edition by Matt Kent, Manuel Garcia, Arturo Lazzi, Barry Kitson, and Chris Cross. Yeah, there's a lot of artists on that, but it's a pretty big book. I picked it up recently and read it, and it's really great. It's the origin story that relaunched the character in 2012. It shows the Project Rising Spirit setup, him helping the Psyops. So this is where the origin story takes place of what the character is now. And again, it's a very good read. A third one you can pick up. This is a lot of fun. Bloodshot Reborn. There's a couple trades out there. Start with the first one. Then this is by Jeff Lemire and Miko Soyayan. It takes the character onto the next journey. There are some really neat little things introduced, and it's a good read. And it ends up leading into more of the past on Project Rising Spirit. So again, All of those are great places to start, but you can't go wrong with the Bloodshot comics. They're just a really good read. Also, if you like novelizations of movies, they have already released the novelization for this film. It's done by Gavin G. Smith, and there's an audiobook version narrated by Brad Hastings. I have not gone through this yet. I just downloaded it before making this video. I tend to listen to books more than read them, so I will be going through that between now and the movie. So I'm looking forward to it, and those are my recommendations. All right. I hope that helps you out. I hope that gives you a little better idea who Bloodshot is, and that you're now looking forward to the movie as much as I am. I really am looking forward to it. I've been buzzed about it since Dinesh posted the first trailer, and just am excited as hell to see this. Now, if you're looking for something different to read between now and then, I'm going to do a personal plug here. I have a new novel of my own out right now. It's a military fiction book. I'm picked up on the Dynamite book series, SEAL Team 6 No More. I've written the 13th book in the series called A New Flame, and it's out now on Amazon in ebook, print, or audiobook. So please pick that up, read it, review it, let me know what you think. And hey, I hope you all have a great time, and maybe I'll see you on the 13th at the movie theaters. Have a good night.